Predictably, I had only gotten a few meager hours of sleep. Even then, my dreams were haunted by the events of the previous shift. They kept replaying in my mind. The strange containers, the horrifying sounds during maintenance, and most disturbing of all, the missing worker no one would acknowledge. As I drove to work, I realized I was gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles had turned white. I forced myself to relax, to breathe. Whatever was happening at PT Shipping, I needed to keep my head if I was going to survive it long enough to find a way out. The parking lot was nearly empty when I arrived, just like before. I recognized Jean's beat-up sedan and felt a wave of relief. At least I wouldn't be alone tonight. Inside, the warehouse hummed with its usual eerie quiet. I found Jean at her station, methodically checking manifests on her tablet. "You look like shit," she greeted me without looking up. "Didn't sleep much," I admitted, dropping my voice. "Not after what happened yesterday." Jean's fingers paused over the screen. "What happened yesterday?" "Someone didn't make it out during maintenance," I whispered, stepping closer. "I heard him scream. Everyone heard it, but no one said anything afterward. They just pretended it didn't happen." Jean's expression didn't change, but her shoulders tensed almost imperceptibly. She glanced at the security camera in the corner before returning to her tablet. "Accidents happen in warehouses," she said flatly. "People get careless, don't follow protocol." "That wasn't an accident," I hissed. "Whatever happens during maintenance killed someone." Jean slammed her tablet down and fixed me with a cold stare. "Keep your voice down. You want to be next?" The harshness of her words stopped me cold. We stood in tense silence until Jean sighed, rubbing her temples. "Look," she said finally, her voice barely audible. "You're not wrong. But talking about it won't help you. Won't help anyone. Just do your job and stay alive." "How can you be so calm about this?" I demanded. "People are dying here, Jean. I know you're careful, but what happens if you make a mistake? It could be you next with one slip-up." "You think I don't know that?" Her voice cracked slightly, the first real emotion I'd seen from her. "I've been here 7 years. I've seen things that—" She stopped herself, composing her features back into their usual mask of indifference. "We don't have time for more of this tonight. We have a lot of shipments coming in. Get your head in the game or get out and see how far you can get by running away. I thought you were smarter than this. Don't prove me wrong. Now come on, first truck's here." She turned around and walked toward receiving. I followed her, my mind racing with more questions. At first, I didn't want to let it go. I wanted to demand real answers about what was happening. But as I followed her, I started to relent and knew she was right. I couldn't do anything about what happened right now. I needed to keep my head down and focus on the immediate task if I wanted to make it through another night. The first truck backed slowly into the bay. Jean punched in the access code and stepped back as the doors swung open. This time, instead of the mysterious black containers, the truck held rows of large wooden crates. "Regular shipment," Jean murmured, almost sounding relieved. "Grab the scanner and let's get started." We worked in silence for nearly an hour, moving crate after crate to the appropriate staging areas. Fortunately, the forklift was working again, and it helped make the process go a lot faster. I started to relax slightly, falling into the rhythm of scan, lift, move, repeat. "So," I ventured cautiously as we took a brief pause between trucks, "how did you end up working here? 7 years is a long time." Jean gave me a sidelong glance, seeming to weigh whether answering was worth the risk. Finally, she sighed. "Needed the money," she said simply. "My mother was sick. Cancer. The treatments weren't covered by her insurance. PT paid better than anywhere else, and they didn't ask questions about my background. She adjusted her gloves, a little ritual I'd noticed she had when thinking about something. By the time she died, I was in too deep. Couldn't just walk away, like you know by now. "I'm sorry about your mother," I said quietly. Jean nodded once, acknowledging my sympathy without inviting further discussion. "Second truck's due in 5 minutes. I need to check the manifests." As she walked away, I noticed a slight limp in her gait that hadn't been there before. The physical toll of this job was evident, but I wondered about the mental toll as well. How many maintenance sessions had Jean witnessed? How many co-workers had she seen disappear? The intercom crackled to life, startling me from my thoughts. "Jean, report to my office immediately." Matt's voice sounded strained, almost nervous. Jean froze mid-step, her shoulders tensing visibly. Without a word, she changed direction and headed toward the administrative section of the warehouse. The look she gave me as she passed was impossible to interpret. Perhaps a warning, perhaps resignation. Left alone, I continued processing the shipment, trying to ignore the growing sense of unease in my gut. 20 minutes passed with no sign of Jean. The second truck arrived, and I found myself facing it alone, remembering the protocol Jean had demonstrated. I punched in the code, stepped back, and watched as the doors swung open. The air that was released when the doors opened felt oddly hot and musty. Normally, they were frigid inside. There was a terrible clattering sound from a fan that may have been the cooling unit. I was no HVAC specialist, but it sounded broken. Inside, there were only 2 large black containers. I scanned them and checked the temperatures, and was disturbed when I saw that both were reading much warmer than normal. Instead of the usual negative numbers for the cold storage items, they displayed +9 degrees Celsius and +12 degrees Celsius respectively, far warmer than they should be. Something was wrong. I hesitated, remembering Jean's warning about containers that weren't operating correctly. I wondered if I should call Matt, but I remembered he was already with Jean, and something about their meeting made me uneasy. I decided to follow protocol and move the containers to their designated area, hoping once they got inside, it would not be an issue anymore. As I maneuvered the first container onto the dolly, a sharp, acrid smell hit me, chemical and organic at once, like formaldehyde mixed with rotting meat. I pulled my shirt up over my nose, but it did little to block the stench. The container seemed lighter than usual, almost buoyant on the dolly. Halfway to the staging area, the container began to leak. It started as a thin trickle from one corner, a viscous amber fluid that splattered onto the concrete floor with a hiss. Each droplet seemed to vibrate upon impact, spreading outward in perfect concentric circles. The smell intensified, burning my nostrils and making my eyes water. I froze, uncertain what to do. The rules were clear. Never open anything. Don't even touch the containers more than necessary. But something was clearly wrong, and no one else was around to help. The leaking intensified, the amber fluid now streaming from multiple seams in the container. Where it pooled on the floor, the concrete began to discolor. As I watched the container leak onto the floor in confused concern, something even worse happened. To my horror, one of the containers emitted a grotesque bubbling and gurgling noise, followed by a distinct thud against its interior. The sound jolted through me. I stared in disbelief until the relentless banging persisted. Something was trapped inside, desperately clawing to escape. I was too shocked to move, to do anything other than listen to the panicked thrashing inside and watch the hideous container convulse and writhe with the efforts of whatever was inside. All the while, More of the putrid liquid splashed onto the warehouse floor. My terrified stupor broke, and I knew I had to do something. At that moment, I was driven by a desperate desire to throw the lid off to try and see whatever, or worse, whoever was in there trying to get out. Then I remembered the cameras and the ever-present danger of what happened to anyone who broke the rules. After an agonized moment, the thrashing in the container had abated somewhat, and to my shame, I had made my choice. I left the container on the floor, remembering the intercom boxes around the warehouse. I searched nearby for the closest one and called for help. "Matt and Jean, we've got a serious situation in Bay B." My voice cracked with panic as I yelled into the intercom. No response came. I pressed the button again, harder this time, as if that would somehow force them to answer. "Matt, Jean, 2 containers are leaking and one of them has something moving inside. I need help now." Only static answered me. The thrashing inside the container had quieted to an occasional thud, but the amber fluid continued to pool, spreading across the concrete in a widening circle. The air felt thick with the chemical stench, making each breath a struggle. Suddenly, a new sound emerged from the second container, a high-pitched keening that oscillated between mechanical whine and human wail. The temperature display flickered wildly, jumping between numbers before settling on error in blinking red letters. "Screw this," I muttered, turning to run toward Matt's office. I made it 3 steps before the overhead lights suddenly dimmed, then brightened to an intense glare that cast harsh shadows across the warehouse floor. The intercom crackled to life, but instead of Matt's voice, a strange, modulated tone emerged. "Containment breach detected in Sector 3. Containment protocols initiated." A siren began to wail, different from the 5 a.m. alarm, more urgent. Red emergency lights began to flash throughout the warehouse, painting the dark corners with a hellish glow. Heavy footsteps pounded across the warehouse floor. Matt appeared, flanked by 2 men I'd never seen before. They wore hazmat suits, their faces obscured behind thick plexiglass visors. Matt's expression was thunderous, a vein pulsing in his temple as he surveyed the scene. "Get back!" he shouted at me, gesturing wildly. "Breach! Get to decontamination now!" The 2 suited men rushed forward with what looked like industrial fire extinguishers, but instead of foam or water, they sprayed a crystalline white substance over the leaking containers and spreading fluid. The chemical reaction was immediate. The amber liquid hardened, turning to a brittle glass-like substance that cracked and splintered. "I tried to call," I began, but Matt cut me off with a savage gesture. "Shut up and move," he snarled, grabbing my arm and dragging me away from the scene. I was able to glimpse behind me as we went back to the office and saw the hazmat men bathing the container in what looked like some type of liquid nitrogen shower. I heard one of them mumble something about putting them back on ice, and then we were back down the hall and away from the mess. I explained to Matt that I thought the truck's cooling unit was broken and somehow the containers warmed up. I knew better than to ask him what the hell that liquid was, or about what I heard and what I saw. He listened to my report and nodded grimly. "I wasn't sure what to do," I added, trying to keep my voice steady. "I followed protocol as best I could." Matt studied me for a long moment, his weathered face unreadable in the harsh office lighting. Finally he spoke, his voice lower than before. "You did better than most would have," he admitted grudgingly. "At least you didn't try to open them." A chill ran down my spine at his words. Had he somehow known I'd considered it? Matt's jaw shifted into something akin to a smile. "Temperature control failure. Happens sometimes during transport." He reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a small metal flask. Taking a deep swig, he offered it to me. Drink. It'll help with the exposure. I hesitated, but the burning in my throat from the chemical fumes made the offer tempting. I took the flask and gulped down a mouthful of what turned out to be surprisingly smooth whiskey. Thanks, I said, handing it back. Matt studied me again, something calculating in his gaze. You did well. Take a break and have a breather outside. We still need to sanitize Bay B. You can get back to it when you return. I was thankful to get the impromptu break to clear my head from the things I had just witnessed. I stepped outside just as Jean was returning. She nodded briefly at me in passing and moved on before I could try and speak with her. I figured she must have been busy, but I wanted to tell her about what I saw. I went outside and got in my car, trying to decompress. I closed my eyes and leaned back against the headrest, trying to make sense of what I'd witnessed. The thrashing inside that container, the amber fluid eating through concrete, none of it could be explained by any legitimate shipping operation. The tap on my window nearly made me jump out of my skin. A woman stood beside my car, her face partially obscured by the hood of a dark jacket. When I didn't immediately respond, she tapped again, harder this time, her knuckles rapping impatiently against the glass. I lowered the window a few inches, caution overriding courtesy. Can I help you? In one fluid motion, she pulled a gun from her pocket and aimed it directly at my face. Don't scream. Don't move. Her voice was steady despite the slight tremor in her hand. Get out of the car. You are going to help me get in there and find my brother. The gun trembled slightly in her hand, near a very well-detailed dragon tattoo that circled her wrist. Her eyes remained fixed and determined. She couldn't have been more than 30, with dark circles under her eyes suggesting she hadn't slept in days. Listen, I said, raising my hand slowly. I just started working here. I don't know anything about... Shut up, she hissed. Mike worked here for 3 months. Yesterday he didn't come home. His car is still even in the lot, but no one's seen him. Her voice cracked slightly. The police said he has not been gone long enough to declare missing, that sometimes people just leave. But I know my brother. He wouldn't just disappear. He never told me the specifics, but he was terrified of this place. I don't know why he kept coming here for work, but I knew if he did not come home, that something would have happened here. Mike. The name hit me like a physical blow. The missing worker from yesterday's maintenance period. The one who didn't make it out in time. You need to leave, I whispered urgently. This place isn't safe. If they catch you here... I don't care, she interrupted, pressing the gun closer. 3 months ago, Mike started acting strange, paranoid. He wouldn't talk about his job, but he was terrified of something. Then yesterday, nothing. His roommate said he went to work and never came back. A tear slid down her cheek. Now get out of the car. My mind raced. If I helped her, I'd be breaking a rule. If I refused, she might shoot me. And if she went in there alone, she'd almost certainly disappear. I had no clue what to do. But for the time being, I obliged and stepped out of my car. Please, you have to understand, I whispered, eyeing the gun nervously. Whatever happened to your brother, I'm sorry, but going in there is suicide. The things I've seen in just 2 days. I don't need your sympathy, she snapped, though her voice wavered. I need answers, and you're going to help me get them. My mind raced through possibilities. We were in the parking lot, presumably visible on security cameras. How long before someone noticed? Before Matt sent someone to check on me. What's your name? I asked, trying to buy time. Lisa, she replied after a moment's hesitation. Mike Donovan is my brother. Lisa, listen to me. There's something wrong with this place. It's not safe. I trailed off, realizing how insane it would sound to describe what I'd witnessed. I don't care. If he is still in there, I am going to get him. You are going to get me in there. Lisa's voice cracked with desperation. She pressed the gun to my back, and I started walking back to the main door. I had no idea what her plan was, but I had to think of something to save both of us. I got back to the door and looked at Lisa, and she nodded. I pressed the button on the door, and as it opened, I saw Jean. She was just stepping outside, a freshly lit cigarette in her lips, as she was walking out at the same time. Her eyes flicked from me to Lisa, then zeroed in on the gun with clinical detachment. "Put that down before you get yourself killed," Jean said, her voice flat and emotionless. Lisa's hand trembled, the gun now wavering between Jean and me. "Stay back. I just want to find my brother, Mike Donovan. He worked here and now he's gone." Jean's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind her eyes. Recognition, maybe even a hint of pity. She took a single step forward. "I knew Mike. He was a good guy." Lisa's face crumpled. "What do you mean, was?" Jean gazed at Lisa with a contradictory mixture of compassion and indifference. "Mike violated protocol during maintenance yesterday. There was an incident." "Bullshit." Lisa's voice rose dangerously. "What does that even mean? Where is he? What aren't you telling me?" She pointed the gun straight at Jean, who stood there looking indifferent to the threat. "You are going to take me inside, and we are going to find him." Jean slowly raised her hands as if finally acknowledging the gun pointed at her and responded emotionlessly. "This way." I followed both of them back into the warehouse, nervously looking around to see if anyone was there to help. I knew we were in danger, but I felt conflicted. This woman was just looking for her brother. It sounded like she had some idea of the danger he was in. I wanted her to have answers and closure, but I knew what it meant to break protocol and try and help. If anything, in order to save my own skin, the rules dictated I had to try and detain her for trespassing. I followed along in a conflicted daze. Distracted as I was, I barely registered the flashing light behind us near the fallen tablet that Jean had left. We walked along for a while, and everything was strangely quiet. We arrived at a side entrance near the storage rooms. We stopped moving, and Lisa looked nervous and asked, "What is this? Why are we stopping?" Jean turned around and flatly stated, "To say I am sorry about this. For you, and for Mike." I was confused, and Lisa looked concerned. A deafening crash erupted behind us as the warehouse door flew open with violent force. Before I could even turn around, a mountain of a man charged through, moving with terrifying speed for someone his size. In one fluid motion, he slammed into Lisa, knocking her forward with such force that the gun clattered across the concrete floor. "Target down," the man announced in a cold, methodical voice. Lisa struggled beneath his massive frame, gasping for air as he twisted her arm behind her back with practiced efficiency. I stood frozen, shocked by the sudden ambush. I took a step back and almost put my own hands up. The large man looked up at Jean, and then at me, and growled out a brief introduction. "Charles Stanton, Security Chief. I see the firearm, so I presume you were taken by force and have not failed to detain the target yourselves." His voice had a strange air of accusation, like it was our fault for not arresting the woman who had us at gunpoint and making him do his job. Stanton suddenly yanked Lisa to her feet. His face was a mask of professional detachment, but his eyes, there was something predatory in them that made my blood run cold. "Civilian trespasser," Jean explained, brushing dust from her uniform. "Armed, as you saw. Took us hostage." Stanton nodded his head and looked at me. "Since the trespasser was apprehended, You are free to leave now. Considering the circumstance, I will speak with Matt and authorize you to take the rest of the night off. Go home and get some rest. Leave this to us." I looked at Lisa, who had been handcuffed, and then at Jean, who was grimly watching as Stanton was logging something on his phone. I knew she had just held me up at gunpoint, but something felt wrong about leaving her with this Stanton guy. I asked what would happen with her. "Local authorities have been contacted," Stanton replied, his voice unnervingly calm. "They'll deal with the trespasser appropriately." Something in his tone didn't match his words. It did not feel like it was standard procedure for handling a trespasser. He wasn't even making a call, and why did he want me to leave all of a sudden? It was just this mountain of a man with dead eyes claiming authorities had been contacted. "I just want to know what happened to my brother," Lisa shouted, struggling against her restraints. "Please, Mike, are you here?" Stanton's massive hand clamped over her mouth, silencing her instantly. "That's enough," he growled, all pretense of professionalism vanishing. I took a hesitant step forward. Maybe I should stay. I was involved, so I should probably give a statement or something. Jean shot me a warning look, almost imperceptible but unmistakable in its intensity. Her eyes said everything her mouth couldn't. "Get out." "Now, your statement can wait until tomorrow," Stanton said, his attention returning to me. "Go home. That's an order." I looked at Lisa one last time. Tears streamed down her face, her eyes wide with terror and pleading. I wanted to help her, but what could I do? If I stayed, I'd likely disappear too. "Okay," I said, finally backing away. I'll see you tomorrow, Jean." Jean nodded grimly at me, and then turned back to Stanton and the captive Lisa. I reluctantly left the warehouse on unsteady legs, my mind reeling with conflicted emotions. The sound of Lisa's desperate cries echoed in my ears as I stumbled to my car. My hands trembled as I fumbled with the keys, dropping them twice before managing to unlock the door. Once inside, I sat motionless, staring at the warehouse's blank exterior. What was happening there right now? What would have happened to me if I'd stayed? I felt sick, guilty, and helpless. I started the engine and pulled out of the parking lot, glancing repeatedly in my rearview mirror at the building receding behind me. No police cars approached. No sirens wailed in the distance. Whatever Stanton meant by authorities, it clearly wasn't the local police department. Back home, I felt a creeping sense of paranoia. I double-locked the door behind me and drew all the blinds. I thought I could ignore everything and press on, but more and more happened every day. I did not know how much more I could take, and my heart sank when I realized I had another day of that madness in store for me tomorrow. Thanks for watching Shadow Voices. New creepy stories uploaded every day. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss tomorrow's nightmare. Got your own story? Submit it using the link in the description. See you in the shadows.